La Belle France. Her stunning beauty, fiery individualism, and searching intellect have for centuries been a source of adoration and fascination to the rest of the world. This is a country where life is a pleasure, love an art, and art a way of life. A stylish, self-assured people who view other nations with warm curiosity and also a certain sympathy for that inevitable flaw: they're not French. France is the third largest European country after Russia and Ukraine, and the fifth largest economic power in the world. In both geography and character, it straddles northern and southern Europe, linking the cool Atlantic with the warm Mediterranean. The country is divided into 22 regions, with its legendary capital, Paris, in the mid-north. Paris is ringed by some of the world's finest and most magnificent cathedrals. To the north of the city are the regions of Nord-Pas-de-Calais, Picardy, Normandy, and Brittany. The wild western peninsula of Brittany is the most ancient region of France. Man has lived here for more than 60 centuries. Neolithic and Dark Age peoples have left their mysterious legacy on the landscape. At Carnac, on the southwest coast, nearly 3,000 standing stones have been arranged in intriguing lines and patterns. The alignments are a puzzle for modern science, a powerful catalyst for the human imagination, and an awesome link to a far distant past. The cold, unyielding Atlantic Ocean has played a crucial role in shaping the Breton character. The sea has for centuries been the source of Brittany's livelihood as well as its isolation. Two of the region's three borders are with the sea, and the third, as the Bretons like to say, is with France. The sea is still a major source of income, and fishing the principal activity along the 1,000 miles of Breton coastline. Boats operating from Breton ports land some of the most valuable catches in France. Yet, the region retains its simple charm and ancient culture. Many Breton traditions can be traced directly to the Celts, who came across the Channel during the 5th century from England and Wales. Until the beginning of the 20th century, Breton dress was widespread in the region. It is not unusual to see older women wearing the traditional costume with its tall headdress or coiffe of handmade Breton lace. They still travel on bicycles, as the coiffe will not fit easily into a car. The Breton language is still widely spoken and has much in common with Welsh. Presiding in dominant isolation over treacherous quicksands, Mont-Saint-Michel, on the border with Normandy, is one of Europe's most striking monuments. The huge granite rock, battered by lethal tides, was once a haven for hermits and holy men. The first abbey was built after the archangel Michael appeared to a local bishop in a dream. The abbey now standing dates from the 11th century, a time when northern France was in the grip of the mighty Normans. The monks lived a life of silent prayer. Their main enemy, the rain and dank sea mists. The knight's room was the only room kept warm. It was here that the monks copied their manuscripts. In the 12th century, Norman power began to wane, but the rise of religious fervor continued. The magnificent cathedral at Chartres, to the southwest of Paris, became an inspiration for Gothic cathedrals throughout Europe. The exquisitely carved royal portal is considered a masterpiece. Inside, ever-changing ethereal light shimmers its rainbow colors through ancient stained glass windows. Chartres is but one of the numerous great cathedrals found throughout the country. Amiens, in Picardy, is the largest in France and survivor of the devastation of 2 world wars. Some of the bloodiest battles of the First World War were fought in northern France. Vast, anonymous cemeteries are the bitter reminder of the greatest mass slaughter the world has ever known. The cemetery at Notre Dame de Lorette was the scene of carnage in 1915. 42,000 young men gave their lives in a battle over a piece of land now obliterated by their graves. The north coast of France was the site of the most crucial battle of the Second World War. On the 6th of June 1944, the Allies launched their D-Day invasion. During a break in the notoriously temperamental weather, American, Canadian, and British troops surged onto the beaches of Normandy. After 10 weeks of attack and counterattack, the Germans were finally defeated, and the route to Paris was opened. There is never an ending to Paris. In the words of Ernest Hemingway, wherever you go for the rest of your life, it stays with you. one of the world's most captivating cities, the center of Paris is small enough to be crossed on foot in a day, but it would take a lifetime to experience its endless enchantment. The city as it is today, with its wide boulevards, open spaces, and grand parks, is less than 150 years old. The grand design was carried out in the late 19th century according to a plan devised by the prefect of the Seine, Baron Georges Eugène Haussmann. The old city was a maze of medieval alleys and ramshackle slums. Large areas of it were demolished to make way for the new, unified plan. But that sense of individuality, the need for something new and shocking, cannot be suppressed for long in Paris. The Eiffel Tower, built in 1889 for the World's Fair, represented French industrial might. It was intended to be a temporary structure due for demolition, but was spared for use as a radio mast. Many Parisians hated the tower when it was first built. The French writer Guy de Maupassant said he enjoyed the view from the top because it was, as he put it, the only place in the city where you can't see the damn thing. French architectural daring continued into the 20th century with the construction of the strange inside-out museum, the Pompidou Center. The project was conceived by the former president, Georges Pompidou. Its inauguration in 1977 was greeted with cries of horror and disbelief, but it has since become another extremely popular and familiar Parisian landmark. In the 1980s, a glass pyramid rising from the courtyard of the Louvre Museum became another focus of controversy. The daring architectural addition doubles as a skylight for the new underground entrance to the museum. The Louvre itself is no stranger to the architectural tinkerings of mankind. During its 700-year history, it has been modified, rebuilt, and extended many times. Once the palace of kings and emperors, it now houses one of the world's finest art collections. It comprises masterpieces from ancient Greece and Rome, as well as a vast European collection. One of its greatest treasures is perhaps the most famous painting in the world. More modern works are on display at the Musée d'Orsay, a refurbished Belle Époque railway station. The museum is devoted to the artistic legacy from the late 19th and early 20th century. A stunning collection of modern masterpieces is on display. It includes some of the finest paintings by the French Impressionists, a group of artists who lived in France in the mid-19th century and shared a desire to paint modern life in new ways. The depiction of light in broken prismatic colors was a shocking break from the traditional notion of art. The name Impressionism was in fact foisted on the movement by a hostile critic who said of a painting by Claude Monet, Impression Sunrise, wallpaper in its embryonic state is more finished than this seascape. Monet's home at Giverny, just outside Paris, was the setting for some of his greatest paintings. He created the flower and water garden next to the house. It became the subject of a prodigious series of 48 canvases entitled Water Lilies, Waterscapes. Monet himself confided to a friend, "These landscapes of water and reflection have become an obsession." In the 20th century, the bohemian gaiety of Parisian life was an inspiration to many painters, such as Toulouse-Lautrec. The café society attracted some of the world's most famous writers and artists of the time. They settled in the hilltop district of Montmartre. It is still a popular venue for painters, but the artists are now perhaps mainly intent on making a living. The old attempts to test the bounds of creative endeavor seem to have largely disappeared. Paris is the capital of chic, and clothes are the people's art form. In the land of lovers, looking good is of supreme importance. One can only dress well in a country where one undresses a lot. The couturier Lanvin is reputed to have said. The Paris fashion revolution began before World War I when Paul Poiret abolished the corset. In the 20s, Coco Chanel continued the liberated trends with the introduction of short hair, trousers for women, suntans, and fashion jewelry. Not all Parisians are style gurus. The Latin Quarter on the left bank of the Seine attracts a more casual and lively crowd. A student haunt for 8 centuries, the quarter was given its name because Latin was the language of instruction. Its character has changed little over the years, and it remains a magnet for young people. At the edge of the Latin Quarter, the Luxembourg Gardens are typical of the elegant style, known as Jardin à la Française. The gardens are a favorite escape for Parisians of all ages, especially those suffering from the ill effects of city living. A sublime sanctuary from the strains of modern life is the nearby Sainte-Chapelle. The Gothic masterpiece was built 700 years ago to house the crown of thorns brought back from the Holy Land during the Crusades. The upper chapel was used by the royal household. The star-studded vaulting is framed by 15 exquisite stained glass windows, flooding the room with glittering rays of rainbow light. A short walk from Sainte-Chapelle, and built in the same era, is another great Parisian symbol, the magnificent Cathedral of Notre Dame. Since medieval times, the cathedral has been at the nucleus of Parisian life. All distances in France are still measured from its square. In the 19th century, the building was almost derelict before the author, Victor Hugo, wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The story captured the French imagination. Funds were soon found to repair damage that had been inflicted during the French Revolution. The revolution began on July the 14th, 1789, when the people of Paris, half-starved after a series of poor harvests, stormed the Bastille. The notorious prison and symbol of repression was destroyed, an event still commemorated throughout France by Bastille Day parades. The uprising swept away the monarchy, and the ensuing struggle for power began an orgy of killing. 40,000 people were executed during what became known as the Reign of Terror. The bloodbath finally came to an end when an ambitious Corsican general, Napoleon Bonaparte, seized power and crowned himself emperor. The trauma of those times has left its mark on Paris and the French people. Bastille Day is still the most important French festival. In Paris, it is marked by a military parade towards the Place de la Concorde. It was here that the French king, Louis XVI, was executed just over 200 years ago. His wife, Marie-Antoinette, met the same fate. Before she died, she was imprisoned in the notorious Conciergerie. Watched day and night by gendarmes, she would often sit motionless, simply waiting for the end she knew was inevitable. Finally, on October the 16th, 1793, the Queen of France was taken from her cell, her wrists bound and hair shorn. The merciless slaughter of the revolution was the culmination of centuries of extravagant monarchy. The arrogance and glory of the old regime was embodied in the vast, lavish chateau at Versailles to the southwest of Paris. In the 17th century, Louis XIV, known as the Sun King, decided to extend a small chateau built by his father. He created the grandest, most expensive palace the world has ever seen. 1,400 fountains were built and a vast reservoir excavated to store water diverted from the Seine. Ostentation and opulence were the order of the day. The magnificent Hall of Mirrors was used for official audiences and balls. The Queen's bedchamber shows the sumptuous surroundings enjoyed by Marie Antoinette before she was imprisoned in the Conciergerie. The court of the time consisted of some 6,000 people. On grand occasions, the unwashed courtiers would cram into the palace rooms. It is said the stench of Versailles could be detected several miles away. In the northeast are the regions of Burgundy, Franche-Comté, Champagne-Ardenne, Lorraine-Vosges, and Alsace. The regions of Alsace and Lorraine have changed hands between France and Germany several times. They were finally restored to France as recently as 1919. The folklore, architecture, food and drink of the area still retain a strong German influence. The capital of Alsace, Strasbourg, plays a vital role in the modern world and is the seat of many international organizations. La Petite France is the oldest and most beautiful part of the city. In the heart of the old quarter is the red sandstone cathedral of Notre Dame. This giant extravaganza of Gothic art has the power to astonish even the most saturated cathedral lover. It has been entwined with the life of the city for almost 1,000 years. It temporarily became Protestant at the height of the Reformation, and during the French Revolution, it was turned into a temple of reason. To the west of Alsace and Lorraine is a region whose name has become synonymous with the unique, sparkling wine it produces. Champagne was discovered by an enterprising 17th century Benedictine monk, Dom Pérignon. He was the abbey cellarmaster in the pretty hilltop village of Auvilliers. He is said to have announced his great discovery with the words, "Come quickly, I'm drinking stars." From such humble beginnings, a wine industry has emerged that is virtually an art form. The bottles are fermented in vast underground cellars. There are almost 8 million of them stored here at the Bollinger cellar in the village of Aix. The still wine from the first fermentation is blended with reserve wines that have been matured for 5 years. Bollinger is an independent house that has been run by the same family since the early part of the 19th century. Guy Bizot, one of the family descendants, considers the blending process one of the most crucial stages.
The reserve wines, we will keep them in magnum. So you have a magnum here of Aï, which is this village, 1988 vintage. Why do we keep them in magnum? It's because it allows us to mature and age the wine much better than if it was in cask or in tank. The point of the reserve wines is, of course, to give the consistency and the continuity of the style of the house. It also gives the structure and the backbone of the wine.
The wine then undergoes a second fermentation and is left for anything from 3 to 15 years to develop its flavor and the famous bubbles. At the end of the aging process, the bottles are turned each day by hand. The process, known as riddling, ensures the yeast deposit collects in the neck of the bottle. A good riddler can turn as many as 50,000 bottles a day. When the sediment has collected, the bottleneck is dipped into a freezing solution. The bottles are then opened and the ice with its imprisoned deposit expelled.
I think the best way to enjoy a glass of champagne is first on the nose, right? And on the nose, you will
Tasting champagne is an art in itself.
Then in the mouth, when you put the wine in your mouth, you have to swirl it around your tongue, and what you will feel is the acidity on the side and the fruit at the back of the mouth. Mm-hmm. And the point for us is to create, by the blending, a harmony between the acidity and the fruit.
Burgundy, another of the many great wine regions in France, is an enchanting patchwork of unhurried farmland, colourful tiled roofs, and typical French country life. A network of canals, originally built for freight transport, is one of the most relaxing ways to enjoy a journey into the heartland of France. Burgundy was once the base for some of the greatest monastic orders. The Benedictine abbots in the region had almost as much power as the Pope. Vézelay Abbey, founded in the 9th century, was a major center of Christianity. It was from here that the 12th century Crusades were launched. The northwest of France comprises the regions of Western Loire, Poitou-Charentes, and the Loire Valley. As the names suggest, the area is dominated by one of the greatest rivers in France. The peaceful Loire Valley is a sanctuary for wildlife and the heart of literary France. Many of the country's most renowned writers, including François Rabelais and Honoré de Balzac, were born or brought up here. It is also chateau country. As Balzac wrote, each step in this land of enchantment allows a fresh discovery of a picture framed by a river or a tranquil pool. During the 16th century reign of Francois I, a series of military campaigns in Italy inspired the absorption of Italian ideas and a great artistic renaissance in France. The king's life work was the great chateau at Chambord. Some historians believe the design was masterminded by the Italian genius Leonardo da Vinci, a close friend of the king. After Francois' death, the court moved to Chenonceaux. The new king, Henri II, was obsessed with his mistress, Diane de Poitiers. He presented Chenonceaux to her as a gift, much to the annoyance of his wife, Catherine de' Medici. When Henri died, the queen wasted no time in evicting Diane. Catherine continued the work her rival had begun. She extended the gardens and used them for lavish court extravaganzas. The interior also benefited from her efforts. The furnishings are still among the most impressive of all the chateaux. Like Chenonceaux, Azay-le-Rideau on the river Indre was designed by a woman, Philippa Lesbailly. It was built purely for aesthetic pleasure without thought for military defense. The result was sublime harmony. The nightly son et lumière, or sound and light show, a concept invented by the French, tells the story of the chateau. Philippa, the wife of one of the king's advisors, supervised its construction, bringing the building materials by boat along the Loire. Disaster struck when a cousin was hanged for embezzling public funds. Her husband was forced to flee and Philippa to hand over her beloved chateau to the king. Central France is dominated by a huge plateau, the Massif Central. The area encompasses the regions of Auvergne and the Rhône Valley, with its principal city, Lyon, the region of Limousin and the departments of Lot and Dordogne. The river Dordogne, one of the longest in France, is the lifeline of an eerie, ancient land home to prehistoric Cro-Magnon man 40,000 years ago. Its waters meander past a medieval world where defense was the main priority. Feudal fortresses tower on giant pinnacles of rock, remnants from a more violent age. La Roque-Gajac chooses the river as its defense, the stone houses hiding in the shelter of the cliff face.
Zali, allez, là, allez, mon cher, allez, allez petit, allez, là, allez.
The Dordogne region, also known as Périgord, is famous to the French for one of the country's most prized gastronomic delights, the truffle. A mushroom-like fungus is very rare, very expensive, and grows only near a particular type of oak tree. Pigs love truffles. In fact, truffles are their favorite food. That's why Monsieur Chaume enlists the help of Rosalie's sensitive, if noisy, snout. The bad news for Rosalie is that she doesn't get to eat any of the truffles. This can understandably make her feel a little fractious at times. The problem of controlling an extremely hefty, deprived pig has prompted many farmers in recent years to use dogs as an easier alternative for truffle hunting. Truffle soup is a speciality at one of the finest restaurants in France. Paul Bocuse, considered by many to be the country's top chef, created the dish at the Élysée Palace in 1975, when he became the first chef ever to be decorated with the Legion of Honor by the French president. His restaurant at Collonges-au-Mont-d'Or, just outside Lyon, is called simply Paul Bocuse.
J'annonce 2 soupes de moule et 2 sols. Non, c'est pas 2 soupes de moule, c'est 2 légers. Oui, 2 légers, mon chat. Ça va bon, alors. 2 légers, 2 sols. Oui.
He was born to a family of chefs who have run a restaurant in the same village since the 17th century. Paul could cook by the time he was 8. He still believes in the personal touch and enjoys welcoming his guests at the door. The secret of his success is a true understanding of the pleasures of taste and smell. Paul Bocuse is at the pinnacle of a French talent for cuisine found in cities, towns and villages throughout the country. Lyon, the third largest city in France, was built at the meeting point of the rivers Saône and Rhône. It was used by the Romans as a base for their conquest of Gaul. The Roman Emperor Claudius was born here. In many ways, Lyon does not have the feel of a big city. The old town, with its pretty, narrow streets and Renaissance townhouses, gives the city the atmosphere of an overgrown village. In the southwest are the regions of Languedoc-Roussillon, Midi-Pyrénées, and Aquitaine, with its famous wine region, Bordeaux. Medieval Saint-Émilion is perhaps the most charming of the wine towns, its sleepy houses nestling in lush vineyards. Wine was first produced here in Roman times, and it is now one of the most prestigious labels in the world. Quality is the key to the town's success. Eight centuries ago, a council of peers, or jura, was set up to supervise the wine production. Each year, they parade through the streets in a day-long ritual known as the jurade, to pronounce on the result of the harvest. In some years, foreign dignitaries, in this case the American ambassador, are admitted to the Brotherhood. Finally, after a banquet and some serious wine tasting, the Jura climb to the summit of a hilltop ruin overlooking the town and proclaim the result of their deliberations.
Au message de Saint-Émilion, à l'âme de notre terroir, à la vie qui parle à travers son vin. Saint-Émilion, Alléluia!
In Bordeaux, winemaking is often a family affair. The fine wines of Château du Cru Beaucaillou in the celebrated Médoc region are the product of a typical family-owned vineyard. Jean-Eugène Bory took over the management of the business from his father in 1953 and has systematically modernized the estate. His eldest son, François-Xavier, works with him at Beaucaillou and will one day take over. The Bory family is full of warmth and humor. They follow the philosophy of the French writer Voltaire, who winked as he said, "I know of only one serious thing on this earth, the growing of grapes." Bordeaux wines are traditionally classified as chateaux to denote the wine-producing area. This does not necessarily mean there is a chateau on the estate, but in many cases, as with Du Cru Beaucaillou, there is a beautiful country house. The south of Aquitaine and most of the Midi is dominated by the magnificent Pyrenees, the natural border between France and Spain. The dramatic peaks carve their giant stepping stones from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean. It is a land that captivates the imagination. In the 19th century, an official posted here from Paris, Alfred de Roland, was so inspired by his surroundings, he composed a series of mountain songs and formed Les Montagnards. From their mountain village of Bagnères de Bigorre, they have succeeded in achieving worldwide fame. The Western Pyrenees is the land of the Basques, a fiercely independent people with their own language, traditions, and culture. They are believed to be one of the most ancient peoples in Europe. The neat, whitewashed homesteads in the mountain village of Asquin are typical of Basque architecture. The people are very proud of their homes, and the family name is often a description of their house. Etxeberri, a common Basque surname, means new house, or Etxandi translates as big house. The Basque game of pelote is centuries old. The original game was played with bare hands. Players now often use a wickerwork or leather glove. It is a game that combines skill, agility, and speed, well suited to the fiery Basque temperament. The Basque coast is among the most scenic in France. Saint-Jean-de-Luz, a modern-day fishing port, is one of the more picturesque coastal towns. It was largely built on the proceeds of piracy. The main resort on the Basque coast, Biarritz, has retained a chic and fashionable reputation acquired in the 19th century. It is also a mecca for surfers. A short distance inland is Bayonne, the economic capital of the region and bastion of Basque traditions. During the annual festival in August, the city is transformed into an ecstasy of excitement, and the natural Basque joie de vivre bursts to the fore. Young Basques are given an opportunity to prove their courage during the Course des Vaches, one of the highlights of the festival. The idea is to encourage the animals to go into one of the bars in the town square. Although the horns are capped, it is important to stay alert. There are inevitably a few bruises and some broken bones, but the injuries are not usually serious. For most, it's another tale to tell at the evening celebrations when the city is filled with music, laughter, and song. To the east, in Languedoc, the medieval city of Carcassonne is a fairy tale linked to an age of brave knights and chivalry. For centuries, two sets of walls made the city impregnable. The first ramparts, originally built by the Romans, were reinforced in the 13th century. During the same era, a new encircling wall guaranteed the city's invulnerability. "4,000 people lived here during the Middle Ages, and as many as 10,000 when invasion threatened. Only a few hundred people live here now, but the streets and buildings of their medieval ancestors still tell their story across the centuries. Languedoc is a nature lover's paradise of wide open spaces and spectacular gorges. The river Ardèche, on the eastern boundary of the region, has cut a swathe through the thick rock and sculpted a natural archway. The Pont d'Arc, as it is known, is a stunning backdrop for canoeists and swimmers. One of the most impressive man-made monuments in the region is the Pont du Gard, a mighty testament to the ancient power of Rome. This vast aqueduct once carried the water supply to the nearby town of Nîmes. The archways are not decoration, but an elaborate support system. The giant stones, some weighing almost 6 tons, were slotted together without mortar. The southeast is in many ways the playground of France. It includes the famous Côte d'Azur, the rich landscape of Provence, and the mighty French Alps, stretching up to Dauphiné, Alpes, and Savoy. Mont Blanc yet gleams on high. The words of the English poet Shelley to describe one of Europe's great mountains. This sparkling alpine wonderland is where the city dwellers of France and many other European countries can revive jaded spirits. The French summer playground is the Côte d'Azur. The sunny climate and sapphire waters are a magnet not solely for the chic and wealthy. Half the population of northern France spend their vacation here. The most famous resort in this hedonistic holiday land is Saint-Tropez. A pretty fishing village popular with artists of the late 19th century, it still retains much of its original Provençal charm. These days, however, the boats moored in the harbor are far from simple fishing vessels. The Riviera began to acquire its glamorous reputation in the 1920s when it became popular with such famous names as F. Scott Fitzgerald and Coco Chanel. Saint-Tropez's chic reputation was established in the 1950s by Brigitte Bardot, who still lives in the area. The Côte d'Azur is by no means all crowds and glitz. Many of the towns and villages have remained relatively untouched. Èze is one of a number of hilltop villages in the region built during the Middle Ages as a defense against invaders. The narrow, winding streets have remained much the same for hundreds of years. To the west of the Côte d'Azur is a region whose very name conjures images to delight the senses. Provence, where the rich earth and burnished sunshine work in harmony to produce a dazzling harvest. At the market in Aix, the Provençal capital, the abundance and variety of nature's riches are typical of the region.
Merci.
In Provence, even the air smells deliciously sweet, for this is the center of the French perfume industry. The gentle climate and cradle of protective mountains make the region ideal for flower production almost all year round. The perfume trade originated here 400 years ago. A group of Italian glove makers began using floral scents to perfume their soft leather gloves. Demand grew in the 18th and 19th centuries and led to the creation of those heady, sensuous fragrances that have become an essential part of French mystique. The landscape of Provence is vast and varied. The gentle beauty of lush woodland and rolling plateau dotted with azure lakes. The tranquility of sleepy hilltop villages basking in the hot sun. The drama of giant river gorges carving their way through craggy limestone rock. The Grand Canyon of the Dordogne is one of the most awesome gorges in Europe. The giant chasm runs for 12 miles, at some points plunging more than 2,000 feet into the waters of the Dordogne River. At the head of the gorge is Castellane, a typical Provençal village with its ancient narrow streets and brightly colored houses framed by the deep blue of the Provençal sky. An important ritual in most Provençal towns and villages is the daily game of boule, or pétanque, a form of bowls. In a region that is famous for its relaxed and philosophical approach to life, arguments over boules and who may or may not be stretching the rules are often the main source of daily tension. The game is also a focal point for the village and a chance for a good chat. The region has its own musical traditions. At his workshop in the little village of Barjol, Marius Fabre, now more than 80 years old, still makes the ancient Provençal instruments. The galoubet is a type of flute made from olive wood. The tambourin is an elaborately carved drum made from local walnut. They are still played by many Provençal folk musicians. Marseille is the largest city in Provence and the oldest in France. It was 2,600 years ago, not long after the Celts settled in Brittany, that the Greeks sailed into this Mediterranean port. It soon became a gateway to North Africa and has since absorbed the traditions of countless settlers and invaders to produce a rich mix of races. The city is still a major seaport, but it has acquired a slightly tarnished reputation because of the drug traffickers and black marketeers who also use its natural harbor.
Pour manger la sardine, une merveille. Il reste encore deux beaux rougets là. Qui les veut les rougets là? 20 francs.
Despite its bad press, Marseille is a fascinating and exciting city. Its strong personality only adds to its allure. The daily fish market at the Old Port is one of the best places to enjoy the city's colorful character. The inland city of Avignon is almost as ancient as Marseille, but it is dominated by its medieval past. The Pope's palace was built in the 14th century when France challenged the power of the Vatican and the French Pope moved to Avignon. Over the next 100 years, 7 popes ruled from the palace before independence from the French king was re-established and the Holy See returned to Rome. Next to the palace are the remains of the 12th century Pont d'Avignon. It's thought that the dancing mentioned in the famous song of the same name actually went on in taverns under the bridge. During the summer, Avignon hosts a month-long festival that gives the city a carnival atmosphere. The streets teem with theatre-goers, performers and musicians who give ad hoc shows in the city centre. The lovely town of Arles to the south is considered by many to be the soul of Provence. The quiet back streets seem to belong to another age. It's easy to imagine Vincent van Gogh wandering through the maze of alleyways during his tormented years here. The town rose to prominence during the 1st century BC when Julius Caesar decided to punish Marseille for siding with one of his rivals and gave Rome's trade to Arles. The town was eventually made the capital of Roman Gaul. The huge amphitheater, once the haunt of gladiators, is now a stage for bullfighters and holds 20,000 spectators. Arles is the gateway to the Camargue, a wild stretch of wind-swept marshland that has somehow escaped the marks of history and the legacy of man. The main source of revenue since Roman times are the vast salt plains that still produce 90% of the sea salt in France. After progressive evaporation, the salt is harvested and piled into heaps known as camels. The Camargue is one of the greatest bird migration sites in Europe. The symbol of the region is the flamingo. The graceful birds are fascinating to watch as they use their webbed feet and down-curved beak to extract invertebrates from the mud. This wild region is a rare glimpse into prehistoric Europe. Some say the famous Camargue horses are descendants of the ponies that roamed through ancient Gaul. They share their territory with Camargue cowboys known as gardiens. Theirs is the spirit of willful freedom, grace, and power, a spirit that cannot be harnessed or tamed, the spirit of France. A country like no other, sensuous yet intellectual, proud yet irresistible. A gifted, passionate people who have added immeasurably to the treasures of mankind. A determined nation that has forged its own destiny on its own terms. France is, above all, in love with life, and the rest of the world is in love with France.
International Video Network brings you the greatest adventures in video entertainment. Award-winning documentaries from Reader's Digest, exploring the masterworks of man and nature. Travel planning videos from Fodors, revealing looks at the people, places, and cultures of the world. Rand McNally Video Expeditions, taking you to some of the most remote and dangerous places on Earth. Rand McNally Video Travelers, whirlwind tours you can enjoy from the comfort of your living room. Super Cities, celebrating the best-loved cities of the world. And Video Visits, whisking you away to exotic, romantic, and popular destinations. International Video Network. Great adventures in video. See your local video retailer or call International Video Network at 1-800-669-4486, extension 850 for your free catalog, featuring more than 250 travel, documentary, and special interest videos.